Hey everyone, it's Ryan, and we are here at episode 8. Yes, almost 2 double digits. If you've made it this long, we're kind of asking why. But anyways, hope you guys have enjoyed our podcast in the past. If you haven't already, subscribe to your favorite podcast channel. We've got a handful that we have them out now, including posting on our social media accounts and YouTube. So there's lots of different ways you can listen to me ramble on once a week. So today we're going to kind of mix things up. Before we get started, make sure you check out our website at www.risenfly.com. All of our products are on there. We appreciate you guys just checking things out. When we started the company, we wanted to make sure we backed everything up, so there's a lifetime warranty on all of our products in there too. So you break a rod because you snapped it over your leg on missing that big fish, or your kid slams it in a car door, or it just breaks for whatever reason, we'll make sure we get you back fishing in no time. So today, we're going to mix things up a little bit, talk about a couple of just fun fishing stories I've had over the years that are almost a 1 in a million chance. So yeah, you go out fishing and you catch some fish and hang out with some buddies, and there's always these random things that just make you crack up or make you listen, recall them years later. So I remember one of my first ones, I was fishing this little spillway for bass, and I was catching a handful of largemouth there, and just in a local stocked lake that has bluegill, bass, and then they stock it with trout. And I remember throwing a grasshopper, and there's this little stick there. And I was like, okay, I just need to pop it over that stick, and it's right where all the bass have been. I pop it over the stick, and the stick wasn't a stick. It was a common water snake. And hooked him right behind the head. So that was fun. That was my first obscure catch of my fly fishing career, just a couple years in. So pulled him in there. There were actually a bunch of white bass in here, and I'd never seen white bass in there and haven't seen them since. But there was a school of 15 to 20, and when I hooked them, they all just attacked the snake. The snake was maybe a foot long. So they pretty much ripped this thing to shreds, and I never had to bring it in, but they saw the feeding opportunity. So that was an interesting occurrence over the years. I think I shared my story of my buddy grabbing a steelhead with his bare hands in a past episode, so I'm not going to share that one, but that one's worth a listen. I'll have to look back at what that is, and maybe I'll share it in the comments later as to what episode that was, but you'll have to check that one out. One of my other favorites, so I talk a lot about steelhead fishing. That's kind of the big thing to do here in western Pennsylvania, as Lake Erie from us, just north of Pittsburgh here. I can hit some of the tributaries in an hour and a half. I can hit the lake in 2 hours. So there's always lots of fun stories over the years. I've got stories of fishing in single digits where, your fly line just becomes a bead of ice, and you can't tell if your flies are on top of the icebergs floating down the stream, hitting you in the leg, or actually down below. So we've got stories that I'm laughing because I can just recall them, that I've got a friend of mine that was driving, and he's a huge Star Wars nut, just absolutely huge. So he's got Yoda's voice and an X-Wing on his GPS. So this was, 10, 15 years ago. And the other guy that was fishing with us, he made some mistake about it, and he goes, "Sorry, I'm not a Trekkie." completely not even understanding that Star Trek and Star Wars are completely different things. And so my Star Wars buddy was like, "It's Star Wars." But that was that fishing trip. It was 9 degrees outside. We're driving from one place to the next. I think we hooked 3 fish out of 6 guys that day. But because of the fun stories, you just remember that and recall those as years and years gone by. One of my next favorite steelhead stories was fishing with a buddy of mine. It's funny, he used to, here's a fantastic story. He moved out here from Colorado. He used to be a trail guy, did some hiking trips and rock climbing and rappelling and stuff like that out in Colorado. And one day he was on a little hike, looked down at the stream and saw this rod and reel, and walks down to it, and it was busted in half. Nobody in sight within miles. He was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So he picks it up, takes it home, does a little research, realizes it's an Orvis rod. They had a warranty on it, so he sent it in, paid for the little warranty claim on that, and then he went to a pawn shop and swapped an old snowboard for a pair of waders, and that's how he got into fly fishing in Colorado. So I took him out a few times here, taught him the ropes. Remember one day we were up for steelhead, And you can fish multiple flies up here. We usually fish 1 to 3 flies, usually 2 for me. And he hooked into a steelhead, and it looked like he had foul hooked it, so he snapped it off. He's like, "Oh man, that was my last fly of that kind that was really working well." I said, "I'll get it back." Completely joking. So I find the fish that he hooked and lost the flies on top. I cast to it a couple times, just hoping literally to catch the fish. And about on my 4th or 5th cast, I cast out and I pull back in, and literally his 2 flies that he lost somehow got dislodged off of the fish and were wrapped him around my rig. So I walked up to him, and he walked like 20 feet down the stream. I was like, "Here's your flies." He's like, "You're kidding me." I was like, "No." Literally just pulled him right off the top of the fish. So that was fun. And this will be a short podcast, but I'm going to share a story, probably 1 in a billion. So we've talked about 1 in a million. Like, how do you get those flies back without catching the fish, without foul hooking them again? But this one here was the same guy. We were fishing. I do a trip up to New York and fish streams running into Lake Ontario every year for salmon and steelhead and brown trout and all kinds of fun stuff up there. The typical king salmon in that area is like 15 to 25 pounds. They get a couple 30 to 40 pounders every year, but they're pretty rare. So these fish put up a great fight. They snap a lot of hooks off. You foul hook them, so you get a fish that's way upstream and it might have 3 or 4 flies in it. So I'm always like, doing surgery and grabbing my hemostats and yanking flies out of these fish's fins before I put them back. So this one, I host the trip, so I'm always the net guy, and I netted the fish for him, and I go to take the hook out of his mouth. And this is where literally 1 in an absolute billion opportunity happened. So this fish had a fly in its mouth, and my buddy, the same guy who I got his flies back from the steelhead, had his hook. The point of the hook was through the eye of the other hook in the salmon's mouth. So he didn't hook it; he hooked through the eye of the hook. Like, what are the odds of attempting to do that, and what are the odds of absolutely doing it without? I don't know. You might as well buy a lottery ticket after something like that. So not only did he hook it through the eye of the hook, but he actually brought the fish all the way in through that too. So the other hook was firmly in the fish's mouth, and he hooked through the eye of the hook, which was just crazy to me that something like that happened. So that was probably 1 in a billion. Lots of fun stories over the years. I would say another one from mine was I was fishing a late night spinner fall. So we've got a brown drake hatch about 45 minutes north in a local stream. And I usually fish late at night. I'll fish into dark. And I'm hiked way downstream, fished a big hole. There's a big rock that a lot of fish kind of hide behind. And there's a deep pool behind it. So great for spinner falls. And I'm fishing, and I'm catching a couple fish, and it's getting darker and getting darker. And I cast out there, and all of a sudden there's this weird slack in my line. And I couldn't see much. And I'm like, oh man, I must not have tightened the tip of my rod. And it flew off, because that's happened before to me. I'm sure it's happened to some of you too. So I'm like, what is going on here? This is weird. There's this weird slack. And I look at the tip of my rod, and it's still there. And then I start to kind of pull some line in and realize that my line is not in the water, but it's in the air. And if you haven't guessed yet, I hooked a bat mid-cast. He came down and literally took my fly. So I brought him in about as far as I could. He kept flying, and he snapped the end of my line, because I was probably fishing 5 or 6X for dry flies then. And then I just heard him screeching off, so I knew he was hopefully going to be fine and hopefully get that fly out of his mouth. But hooked a bat. And so I've hooked a snake, I've hooked a bat, I've hooked a couple other weird things over the years, caught some crayfish, hooked snails that have maybe taken a fly. So those are all weird catches over the years. And I remember walking back to my car in the pitch black with a little headlamp on. And it's just kind of a little dirt path back to the car. I was maybe 30 yards away from the car, and there was a doe bedded up 5 feet off of the path. And I walked up, and she spooked, and yeah, I about needed a new pair of underwear after that, because it was like 11 o'clock at night walking back in the pitch black, and this deer just scared the you-know-what out of me. So that was a fun, interesting encounter with 2 different animals on that fishing trip outside of the fish. So go ahead and share some of your stories. Comment below, comment on any of our media outlets there. on some, one in a million opportunities that you've had over the years fishing, and tell the fun stories that I'm sure you're sharing with all your friends too. So just wanted to have something a little different today, share some fun stories over the years, and hope you guys have enjoyed those. So before we check out, make sure that you subscribe to any of our channels here. We want you guys to be notified of all of our new podcasts that we're putting out on a weekly basis that come out on Monday mornings. We've got a handful in the future already recorded, so that we've got a few out there. Once we record a ton, we will probably boost it to 2 a week rather than 1 a week. So we're still working on making sure we've got plenty of content for you guys. So we hope you've enjoyed it. Check out our website at risenfly.com and have a great day. Thank you guys for listening.